From the dojo to the octagon, this is Budocast, your source for the latest in martial arts news, culture, and competition. From breaking fight results to evolving techniques, we cover it all. Let's get into it.
Absolutely.
So imagine you're looking at the single biggest, just most guaranteed, earth-shattering payday in the entire history of your profession.
Right, like generational wealth.
Exactly. Generational wealth handed to you on a silver platter, and you just look at that contract, you shake your head, and you hand it right back.
Which is just completely insane to most people.
It is, because it fundamentally offends your sense of competitive purity. And today, we are diving headfirst into this incredibly muddy, ruthless, and honestly entirely contradictory business of modern mixed martial arts.
Yeah, and if you are tuning into this deep dive as a fan of like mainstream team sports, where you win a game, you advance in the bracket, and it's all mathematically fair.
Oh, you just have to throw that playbook completely out the window.
You really do. It is a completely different universe. Because in a traditional sports league, the structure is just a clean meritocracy. You know,
you can map out the playoffs on a whiteboard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you step into the ecosystem of combat sports, specifically where we are right now in the spring of 2026, you're looking at a landscape where the ladder is just missing half of its rungs.
It's totally broken.
It is. It's this space where competitive merit is constantly going to war with financial gain. And corporate counter-programming really dictates the fights you actually get to watch on your screen.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We are going to peel back the curtain for you and explain the why behind the matchmaking.
Because there's always a why, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we have a stack of sources today that span the entire spectrum of this industry. We're going to look at the absolute pinnacle of championship matchmaking. We're going to break down an unprecedented corporate streaming war happening on May 16th.
That Netflix situation is going to be wild.
Completely wild. And then we're going to take a really hard, honestly uncomfortable look at the unforgiving realities at the absolute bottom of the roster.
Because the reality is, this isn't just about two athletes stepping into a steel cage. I mean, it is, but it's also about these massive, invisible levers being pulled in boardrooms.
Right, by executives balancing television contracts.
Yeah, TV contracts, international marketing budgets, and frankly, the fragile egos of superstars.
Yeah.
To really understand the sport you are watching, you have to understand the business mechanisms driving it.
So let's start at the very top of that food chain, because the UFC has officially locked in the main event for UFC 328, which is happening May 9th, 2026. In Newark, New Jersey.
Finally.
Yeah, right. And the matchmaking here is just a perfect distillation of everything we just talked about. Khamzat Chimaev, the reigning 185-pound middleweight champion, is finally defending his title.
And his record is just terrifying.
It is. He's sitting at a flawless 15-0 in MMA and 9-0 in the UFC. And his opponent for this is former champion Sean Strickland, who comes into this bout with a record of 30-7.
The timeline of this division is where the real story lives, though. I mean, it shows you exactly how the promotion manipulates its own rankings to engineer the most profitable narrative.
Because Chimaev won this belt back in August of 2025.
Right. He put on an absolute clinic. He dominated Dricus du Plessis to win a unanimous decision. And then
they just disappeared.
He went completely dark. The champion hasn't fought since.
Wait, let's pause right there. Because if you are trying to follow the logic here, August 2025 to May 2026 is a massive gap for a newly crowned champion who isn't even injured.
Yeah, there's 9 months of total stagnation at the very top of the division.
It's crazy.
It creates a tremendous bottleneck. Like, think about the economic impact that has on the rest of the division. If the champion isn't fighting, the number one contender isn't getting their title shot.
Which means the guys below them are just stuck.
Exactly. The number 2 and 3 guys are stuck fighting these incredibly dangerous contenders for just a fraction of the pay, basically trying to tread water.
Just risking their spot for no real advancement.
Yeah. And what makes this gap so glaring is that other champions who fought after Chimaev won his belt have already been booked, fought, and defended their titles.
So we have this massive backlog. And if we look at the standings, like if we pretend for a second that this is a mathematical meritocracy, the person next in line is glaringly obvious.
100%. Nasruddin Imavov.
Right. Imavov is universally recognized right now as the number one contender. He is ranked second in the world, sitting only behind du Plessis, who literally just lost the belt to Chimaev.
Logically, Imavov is the answer.
Yeah.
But the UFC is not in the business of logic. They are in the business of selling pay-per-views.
They bypassed Imavov completely.
Completely. They bypassed him and handed the golden ticket to Sean Strickland. Now, Strickland just fought in February of 2026.
Yeah, he bounced back with a TKO over Anthony Hernandez.
Right, which was a great performance.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the deeper mechanism of why a recent win suddenly vaults you over the established #1 contender.
I want to talk about Chimaev's aura for a second, because I think that plays heavily into this whole situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's massive.
I was reading through his resume and our notes, and it struck me. It's like Chimaev's career is permanently locked in a video game boss rush mode. You know what I mean?
That's a perfect way to put it.
Like where you skip all the low-level grunts, you skip the exploring, and the game just forces you to fight final-level opponents back to back to back with absolutely no save points.
That is exactly what the matchmakers have done with him. I mean, if you look at his recent run, it is staggering. He doesn't just fight contenders.
No, he fights legends.
He is systematically dismantling the greatest fighters of the modern era.
Yeah.
He dominated Duplessis. Before that, he ran through Robert Whittaker.
Right.
Before that, he fought Kamaru Usman. The UFC has built him into this, existential threat. He isn't just a champion. He is the monster hiding under the bed of the middleweight division.
So, okay, let's unpack this. If Chimaev is the final boss, I have to challenge the logic of feeding him Sean Strickland right now. I get that Strickland is a former champion. He won the belt in 2023. But since winning that belt, Strickland is 2-2.
Yeah, his record lately is very mixed.
He lost twice to Dricus Duplessis, and Chimaev just made Duplessis look like an amateur. So if other champions have fought since August and Imavov is waiting in the wings, what does Strickland getting the nod tell you about how the UFC values recent activity versus ranking purity?
It tells you that to the UFC, the ranking system is a promotional tool. It is not a legally binding contract.
Right, it's a suggestion.
Exactly. They use the rankings when it is convenient to sell a fight, and they completely ignore them when a better storyline presents itself.
And Strickland is definitely a storyline.
Oh, for sure. When Strickland TKO'd Anthony Hernandez in February, he didn't just win a fight. He got on the microphone. He created viral clips.
He always does.
Right. He reminded the casual audience that he is a chaotic, unpredictable former champion. And the executives look at that momentum. They look at his ability to sell a press conference with his mouth, and they compare it to Imavov.
And Imavov is, what, too quiet?
Well, Imavov is highly skilled, deeply technical, and mathematically deserving. But he doesn't bring the circus. Strickland brings the circus.
It's the difference between a sporting event and a spectacle. And when you look at the styles, man, what a collapse.
Stylistically, it's fascinating.
You have Chimaev, who brings this suffocating, grappling, heavy, terrifying forward pressure. He just physically breaks people.
Yeah, he drowns them.
And then you have Strickland, who utilizes this very bizarre, upright, defensive pressure boxing style. He marches forward, uses the Philly shell, and just jabs people into exhaustion.
And this is where the whole concept of MMA math completely breaks down, which is exactly why fans love the sport.
Right.
Like you pointed out, Strickland struggled mightily with Duplessis, losing to him twice. Chimaev walked right through Duplessis. If MMA was simple math, Chimaev would obliterate Strickland in 60 seconds.
But it's never simple math.
Never. Styles make fights. Strickland has historically incredible takedown defense and a jab that disrupts aggressive forward movement.
The promotion is banking on that tension.
Exactly. They are betting that the stylistic contrast, the stoic defensive boxer against the overwhelming undefeated grappler, is going to generate massive intrigue.
And they are making sure the Newark crowd gets their money's worth because they are really stacking the deck on the undercard for UFC 328.
Oh, the undercard is fantastic.
They are treating this like a massive tentpole event. Just look at the light heavyweight bout they booked. Former champion Jan Blachowicz is running it back against Bogdan Guskov.
This is a really fascinating piece of matchmaking because it directly addresses the psychology of unresolved conflict.
Because of the draw.
Right. These two just fought in December at UFC 323, and it ended in a majority draw.
Which is just the most frustrating outcome in the sport.
It really is.
If you are a fan, you invest 15 minutes into a fight, and a majority draw leaves you feeling completely empty. Nobody wins, nobody loses, the tension just hangs there.
Exactly, but the matchmakers know exactly how to weaponize that frustration. A majority draw is rare. It means two judges scored it a tie and one judge picked a winner. Blachowicz is a legendary veteran. He's been fighting the absolute best in the world for a decade, holding a record of 29-11-2. Guskov is the dangerous up-and-comer, sitting at 18-3-1.
And their first fight was crazy.
In December, they went to war. There were massive momentum swings, near finishes, and total exhaustion. By booking the immediate rematch, you guarantee a fight with built-in narrative stakes.
Neither guy got closure.
Exactly. Neither man got the closure they wanted. You don't have to manufacture any fake animosity to sell this fight. The unfinished business does all the heavy lifting.
It's brilliant. And speaking of guaranteed action, they threw a lightweight bout onto this card that genuinely blew my mind. King Green, who is 39 years old, by the way, is stepping in against Jeremy Stephens.
That fight is out of nowhere, but I love it.
Right. I want you to picture this matchup because King Green is coming off a massive upset TKO win over Daniel Zellhuber just last month in Mexico City.
The trajectory of these two veterans is wild. Let's look at King Green first. To be 39 years old in the lightweight division, which is arguably the fastest, most reflex-dependent division in the sport.
It's a young man's game.
It really is. And to still be pulling off upset knockouts over highly touted prospects in high altitude like Mexico City, it defies sports science.
How is he doing it?
He has found this late career resurgence by relying on timing, defensive head movement, and pure veteran craftiness.
And then you look across the cage at Jeremy Stephens. For the listeners who might only follow the UFC, Jeremy Stephens actually left the promotion for a while.
He did, yeah.
And he didn't just go to a regional MMA show. He went over to BKFC, the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. He literally took off the 4-ounce gloves, wrapped his wrists, and fought Mike Perry with bare knuckles back in October.
Which is brutal.
He lost that fight, but the fact that he is transitioning back to the octagon right now is crazy to me.
Think about the mechanical adjustment that requires. When you fight bare knuckle, you cannot strike the same way you do in MMA.
Because of your hands.
Yeah, if you throw a looping overhand right and hit the hard part of a skull without a glove, you will shatter your hand. You have to punch differently. You defend differently because there are no gloves to hide behind.
Wow, yeah.
Stephens has spent the last year rewiring his brain for a hyper-violent, specialized sport. Now he has to come back, put the gloves back on, worry about takedowns, worry about kicks, and face a guy in King Green who has a masterful defensive guard.
It is absolute chaos, and I am here for it. But the promotion isn't just relying on the old guard for this card. They are actively building the next generation, too.
Right. They always have to look ahead.
They booked a prospect named Bisangur Suzerkaev, who is undefeated at 10-0 in MMA and 2-0 in the UFC, against Jordan Santos. Now, the key detail here is that Suzerkaev trains at the same gym and is a teammate of the main event champion, Khamzat Chimaev.
This is a classic promotional mechanism. It's what they call the rub.
The rub. Explain that.
If you are a matchmaker, you know millions of eyes are going to be on Chimaev during fight week. The cameras will be at his hotel, at his gym, at his open workouts.
Right.
By putting his undefeated teammate on the undercard, you ensure that Suzerkaev gets caught in that media slipstream.
So they elevate him by association.
Exactly. If Suzerkaev goes out and gets a spectacular knockout, and then Chimaev defends his belt later that night, you aren't just selling a fighter anymore. You are selling an empire. You are building the mythos of their gym as an unstoppable factory of killers.
It really is a masterclass in how to construct a card from top to bottom. You know, you have the undisputed title, the veteran bloodbath, and the rising prospect, all carefully engineered to maximize the brand.
It's very structured.
But while the UFC is busy mathematically engineering these title fights and building their stars, their entire system completely shatters when they run into a legacy fighter who just doesn't care about their belts or their money.
Go ahead.
And that brings us to Nate Diaz.
This situation with Diaz is, without a doubt, the most fascinating leverage play happening in the sport right now.
It is incredible. If you are listening to this, you definitely know who Nate Diaz is. He is 40 years old, a cultural icon, and he was formally offered a contract to return this year for a massive trilogy fight against Conor McGregor.
The biggest fight you could possibly make.
Right. The rivalry is tied 1-1. The world has been waiting a decade for the tiebreaker. And Nate Diaz looked at the offer and flat out said no.
We really need to contextualize what no means in this specific scenario. A fight against Conor McGregor is universally acknowledged as the single most lucrative night a fighter can have in their career.
The red panty.
Exactly. The pay-per-view points, the base salary, the global sponsorships. It is the golden ticket. Most fighters would fight their own grandmother for a McGregor contract.
Totally.
For Diaz, at 40 years old, at the absolute tail end of his competitive window, to reject the largest paycheck of his life requires a completely different psychological framework than 99% of the roster.
Broadcast commentator John Anik actually weighed in on this, and his take was surprising. Instead of towing the company line, Anik defended Diaz's decision.
He called it refreshing, right?
Yes, he called it refreshing. Anik pointed out that Diaz isn't looking for the pageantry. He isn't looking for the biggest possible paycheck. He is looking for competitive merit. In fact, Diaz didn't just say no. He made a counteroffer.
Which was brilliant.
He told them he specifically wanted to fight Charles Oliveira instead.
And that counteroffer tells you everything about what competitive merit actually means to a legend like Diaz.
Let's look at the two options.
Okay, let's look at them.
Option A is McGregor. McGregor is a global superstar, but he has been largely inactive. He has suffered catastrophic injuries. The narrative around a McGregor fight is a nostalgia act. It's a cash grab.
Right.
Option B is Charles Oliveira. Oliveira doesn't have a fraction of McGregor's mainstream celebrity, but within the walls of the martial arts community, Oliveira is feared.
Oh, he is terrifying. He is an active, vicious, world-class submission specialist. By demanding Oliveira, Diaz is making a statement. I'm not here to be part of a celebrity comeback tour. I am a martial artist, and I want to test my jiu-jitsu against the most dangerous lightweight on the planet.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back on this narrative just a little bit.
Sir.
Is this actually just about competitive merit and martial arts honor for Diaz, or is this about Nate asserting ultimate control over his own narrative by refusing to be the B-side to McGregor's massive comeback? Because we know Nate's entire brand is built on anti-establishment defiance. He hates playing second fiddle.
It is almost certainly a combination of both, and you are absolutely right to highlight the power dynamic.
Right, because someone has to be the A-side.
Exactly. In boxing and MMA, the A-side dictates the terms. They dictate the walkout order, the promotional focus, often even the weight class. If Diaz takes the McGregor fight, the entire marketing campaign is the return of the king.
And Diaz is just the guy standing across from him.
Right. McGregor is the focal point.
Yeah.
Diaz is just the antagonist brought in to get slain. Diaz's ego, and I mean that in the most respectful, necessary way, a fighter must have an ego, cannot tolerate being a prop in someone else's movie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
By asking for Oliveira, Diaz forces the promotion to treat him as the A-side.
But the UFC can't just halt their plans because Nate Diaz said no. They have to pivot. They desperately need a massive opponent for McGregor's return. And according to our sources, the frontrunner has shifted.
I moved on quickly.
They did. They are now targeting Max Holloway for Conor's return, specifically aiming for UFC 329 during International Fight Week.
Which is a phenomenal pivot from a matchmaking perspective. Max Holloway is one of the most beloved, high-volume strikers in the history of the sport.
He really is.
He recently lost his BMF title at UFC 326. But he is a stylistic dream for a returning McGregor.
Let's talk about that BMF title, because John Anik gave us some incredible behind-the-scenes insight into this. For context, the BMF, the Baddest Mother title, is a novelty belt created specifically to reward fighters who put on violently entertaining stand-up wars.
Right, it's a violence belt.
Max Holloway lost that belt to Charles Oliveira at UFC 326. And John Anik admitted that while he and Joe Rogan were calling that title fight live from the broadcast booth, they looked at each other and thought, wow, man, this is boring.
That is a staggering admission.
It really is.
It pulls the curtain all the way back. You have Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway, two of the most prolific finishers in the history of the sport, fighting for a belt that was literally invented to celebrate pure violence.
Yeah.
And yet the commentators are bored.
How does that happen? How do two wildly exciting fighters create a boring fight?
It happens because MMA is a game of high-level problem solving. Oliveira is a master of offensive pressure and submissions. Holloway is a master of distance management and volume boxing.
So they just canceled each other out.
Exactly. When you put them together, they neutralized each other's primary weapons. Holloway didn't want to overcommit and get taken down, and Oliveira couldn't track Holloway down to gauge his grappling.
Oh.
It became a tactical, high-stakes game of physical chess. But tactical chess does not sell the BMF brand. The BMF brand requires chaos.
Which is exactly Anik's point. Because of how tactical and dull that Holloway and Oliveira fight played out, A McGregor versus Holloway matchup for the BMF belt makes total logical sense for the promotion.
It's in a necessary course correction.
Exactly. You bring in McGregor, who throws fight-ending power from minute one, and you pair him with Holloway, who has one of the greatest chins in history and will just stand in the center of the octagon and trade.
It's guaranteed action.
You are mathematically guaranteeing a violent spectacle to inject life back into that specific piece of intellectual property.
It completely repairs the damage done to the BMF concept.
But let's circle back to Nate Diaz for a second. Because Nate didn't just turn down the McGregor money and go sit on his couch in Stockton.
No, he did not.
He took his massive fan base, his competitive drive, and his anti-establishment brand to a completely different network. And this leads us to an unprecedented corporate showdown happening on May 16th.
We are witnessing the streaming wars officially arriving in the live combat sports space.
Let's set the stage for you. May 16th, 2026. Nate Diaz is fighting Mike Perry on a card promoted by MVP MMA. And this isn't on traditional pay-per-view. This event is streaming live on Netflix.
Which changes everything.
It does. And if Diaz versus Perry wasn't enough, the card features a co-main event that honestly feels like hallucination. Ronda Rousey versus Gina Carano.
Let's analyze the business mechanics of what Netflix is attempting here. Netflix is a global streaming monolith with hundreds of millions of subscribers.
Right.
They are trying to capture the live sports market, but they are doing it with a very specific philosophy. They aren't trying to put on the most technically proficient MMA card.
Not at all.
They are engineering a cultural spectacle designed to capture the attention of people who do not regularly watch fights.
It's pure nostalgia and violence.
Well, precisely. Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey are the two most important pioneers in the history of women's MMA. They both transitioned into Hollywood. They are household names.
Right.
Nate Diaz is a cultural icon. Mike Perry has become the undisputed face of bare-knuckle violence. Netflix is banking on the fact that when a casual viewer logs into their account on a Saturday night to watch a sitcom, a massive banner featuring Ronda Rousey will make them click.
It is an event built entirely for the algorithm.
Exactly.
And the UFC, who has held a near monopoly on premier combat sports for 2 decades, cannot just sit back and let Netflix dominate a Saturday night unchallenged.
No, they have to respond.
So they deploy a counter-programming measure. On that exact same night, May 16th, they are putting on UFC Vegas 117. It is streaming on Paramount Plus Jan, and it is taking place in Las Vegas at the Meta Apex.
But if we look at the cards side by side, it is one of the most jarring contrasts in the history of combat sports promotion.
Let me read you this Vegas 117 lineup, and if you are listening to this, try to compare this to Rousey, Carano, and Diaz. The main event is Arnold Allen versus Melquizael Costa at 145 pounds.
With fighters, but yeah.
The main card features Ketlin Vieira versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti, Rodolfo Bellato versus Modestas Bukauskas, Daniel Barres versus Luis Gurul, and Cody Brundage versus Andre Petrosky.
The journalists over at MMA Mania evaluated this situation, and they used one very specific, highly accurate word to describe this counter-programming effort: a mismatch.
I mean, I looked at this, and the first analogy that came to my mind was music. It feels like you have a highly technical, incredibly talented, local indie rock band insisting on playing a gig at a dive bar right across the street from a massive stadium pop concert.
That's a great way to look at it.
Like, sure, the 300 people who show up to the indie gig are going to deeply appreciate the complex time signatures and the guitar tone. But there is a literal pyrotechnics show and 80,000 screaming fans next door.
It's a perfect analogy. Arnold Allen is a phenomenal top-tier featherweight. His footwork, his striking fundamentals, he's technically brilliant. But he is not a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
Melquizael Costa is a tough, durable competitor, but he is not a name that is going to pull a casual viewer away from the Netflix homepage.
So what does this all mean for the fans? Is the UFC hoping core fans will watch Allen versus Costa, or are they just fulfilling a Paramount Plus contractual obligation while conceding the night to Netflix?
If you look at their corporate history, they almost never concede anything out of weakness. This is calculated resource management.
How so?
Well, you mentioned the venue, the Meta Apex. The Apex is a small, custom-built facility in Las Vegas owned by the UFC. It has no massive live audience.
Oh, so the overhead is tiny.
Incredibly low overhead costs to produce a broadcast from the Apex compared to renting out an arena in a major city. They have a lucrative contract with Paramount Plus Hembin, and that contract stipulates they must deliver a certain volume of live events per year.
They just have to feed the content machine.
Exactly. The broadcast partner demands inventory. By putting on a card headlined by Allen and Costa at the Apex, they are serving their hardcore base and fulfilling their contractual obligations with absolute financial efficiency.
So they aren't even trying to beat Netflix.
They recognize that going head-to-head with a Netflix cultural phenomenon is a losing battle for casual eyeballs. If they wanted to truly compete on May 16th, they would have booked John Jones or Islam Makhachev.
Right.
But why burn your most valuable pay-per-view driving assets on a night when half the sporting world is distracted by a Netflix spectacle?
So they keep the powder dry, they deploy a standard fight night, they keep the roster active, and they let Netflix have the casuals for the night.
Right. And you have to look at the rank of this Paramount Plus card to understand its true purpose. You've got the prelims starting at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Right.
You've got fighters like Alice Ardelene against Polyana Viana, Timmy Kwamba against Bernardo Sopage, Shauna Bannon against Nicole Cagliari, Thomas Gant versus Trey Ogden.
I mean, these are not household names.
No, but they are the literal foundation of the sport. These are the rank-and-file athletes who make up the bulk of the 500-plus fighter roster.
Right.
While the world is watching millionaires fight on Netflix, this Paramount Plus card acts as a massive sorting mechanism. A fighter like Cody Brundage or Andre Petrosky, who are fighting each other in the middleweight division on this card, they aren't fighting for global celebrity on May 16th.
No, they're fighting for their job.
They are fighting for survival.
Which is the perfect transition, because while we spent the first half of this deep dive talking about million-dollar leverage plays, massive streaming monoliths, and undisputed world titles, this ecosystem has a very dark, very harsh bottom floor.
The reality check.
Exactly. But before we get into the unforgiving reality of the cut list, before we dive deeper, shout out to our sponsors. First up, Elite Sports, leaders in premium fight wear for BJJ and MMA. Whether you're rolling or striking, they've got gear built to move with you. Check them out at elitesports.com. And if you're a school owner looking to optimize your dojo's performance, you need to check out Lotus by Open Black Belt. It's the ultimate management software for tracking ranks, attendance, and billing. They are currently offering a free trial to our listeners. Streamline your business so you can spend more time on the mats. Visit openblackbelt.com to start your trial today. You can find links for both in the show notes. And if you've got a story, news tip, or question, send it to us at budocast.com.
So we've talked about the top of the mountain. Now we have to look at the basement.
Yeah.
The transition from the streaming wars to the bottom of the roster is jarring, but it is necessary to really understand the sport.
We are looking at the unforgiving machine of roster management. In the past week, the UFC parted ways with 3 fighters, Antonio Tricoli, Bruna Brazil, and Luana Carolina.
And if you are trying to understand how this business actually operates behind closed doors, analyzing why these 3 specific fighters were cut tells you everything you need to know about accountability standards.
It really is a masterclass in executive philosophy. When you break down these 3 names, you are looking at 3 completely different paths to the exit door.
Exactly. Let's start with Antonio Tricoli because his situation is the most straightforward.
Tricoli's run is a tough read. He is 35 years old. He went 0-4 in his official appearances. Between 2024 and 2025, he took losses to Bantas Kondrativicius, Shara Bullet, Trijan Gore, and Mansour Abdulmalik.
Yeah, that's a rough stretch.
But his history with the promotion goes deeper than that, and it's bad.
Right.
His only actual victory inside an octagon was back in 2019 on Dana White's Contender Series when he submitted Kenneth Berg. But even that was stripped away and overturned to a no contest due to a failed drug test.
When you look at Tricoli, the corporate math is brutally simple. It is a formula of 0 competitive success multiplied by historical baggage.
Right.
The promotion is, first and foremost, a results-driven enterprise. If you lose 4 straight fights, your job is going to be in severe jeopardy, regardless of who you are. But when you factor in the failed drug test from the Contender Series, it completely destroys any internal equity the fighter might have had.
Explain that concept of equity in this context, because I think listeners hear about Contender Series contracts and assume it's just a clean slate.
It's not a clean slate at all. The Contender Series is an investment vehicle. They are investing broadcast time and marketing into young, cheap talent, hoping they turn into stars.
Makes sense.
When a fighter fails a drug test on that platform, they aren't just breaking a rule, they are embarrassing the scouting process. They are creating legal and athletic commission headaches.
They're a liability.
Exactly. So when a fighter with that kind of baggage eventually makes it to the main roster, the leash is incredibly short. For Tricoli, at 35 years old, going 0-4 with a tainted past, there's no upside left to explore. It is the easiest, most clinical cut a matchmaker can execute.
Okay, so Tricoli is cut for performance and conduct. That makes total sense. But then you look at Bruna Brazil, and her situation highlights a completely different corporate priority.
Yes, the entertainment factor.
Right. She was one of the very first members of the Fighting Nerds gym to enter the promotion back in 2022. She leaves with a negative 3-5 record. Her final fight was just this past weekend in Seattle, where she lost a decision to Alexia Tainara.
And look at her whole record.
The stat that jumps off the page to me is this. Out of her 8 bouts, 7 of them went to a decision.
And that specific statistic is the absolute crux of why she is no longer employed. Bruna Brazil's release is a direct reflection of the stance on entertainment value.
So it's not just the losing record.
Yes, she had a negative 3-5 record, but historically they will absolutely tolerate a losing record if you were putting on wars.
Right, the guys who just brawl.
There are fighters who are 2-6 who keep getting contracts because every time they step in the cage, they throw caution to the wind, bleed for the crowd, and create viral moments. They are fundamentally in the business of selling action.
So when a fighter goes to a decision 87% of the time, they just become a liability to the broadcast?
Exactly. Let's break down what a decision actually means to the pacing of a TV show. A 3-round fight that goes the distance takes 15 minutes of cage time, plus walkouts, introductions, and breaks. That's nearly a half hour of television time.
That's a long chunk of the card.
If those 15 minutes are highly technical but cautious, if there are no knockdowns, no deep submission attempts, no moments that make the crowd roar, it acts like a speed bump for the entire event.
You lose the audience.
Right. If you are a matchmaker staring at a roster of 500 fighters and you have 20 new hungry kids coming off the Contender Series who fight like maniacs, you have to make room. A fighter with a negative record who stalls out the momentum of a fight card 7 out of 8 times is viewed as entirely expendable.
It's a harsh reality. You can be technically sound, but if you don't bring the chaos, you are on borrowed time.
You really are.
But I want to spend significant time on this third cut, because the Luana Carolina situation is the most dramatic and, frankly, the most debatable of the 3.
It's a tough one.
Carolina is 32 years old. Unlike the other 2, she actually had a positive winning record in the promotion. She was 6-4. In fact, she was recently on a 3-fight winning streak.
Right.
She had consecutive wins over Ivana Petrovic, Yulia Stoliarenko, and Lucy Pudilova. Her streak only ended recently with a loss in September of 2025. Yet, despite that winning record, she was cut.
Yeah, she was like a...
And she was cut strictly because of a massive 8-pound weight miss that forced the last-minute cancellation of her bantamweight fight against Melissa Mullins in London.
This is the most revealing look into the corporate machinery we have discussed today. Trocoli was cut for losing and baggage. Brazil was cut for losing and a lack of entertainment value.
And Carolina.
Luana Carolina was cut for a fundamental, catastrophic failure of professionalism.
What's fascinating here is the Luana Carolina situation. I have to push back on this because if I am a listener looking at the sheer fairness of this, cutting a woman who was recently on a 3-fight win streak over one bad weight cut feels insanely disproportionate.
I see why you think that.
Especially when you have guys like Trocoli sticking around for 4 straight losses. How should listeners interpret that level of zero tolerance? Is missing weight by that much viewed internally as a worse offense than actually losing a fight?
In many structural ways, yes, it is exponentially worse.
Right.
To understand why, you have to look at the massive logistical and financial domino effect of a canceled fight.
Okay, walk us through it.
Think about what goes into an event in London. The promotion spends millions of dollars months in advance. They market the specific matchups. They sell tickets based on a specific number of bouts.
Right.
They negotiate incredibly strict broadcast windows with international television networks. When a fighter misses weight by 8 pounds, which, by the way, is an astronomical amount of weight in professional MMA, that is not a miscalculation. That is a physical collapse of the process. It sabotages the entire machine.
Walk us through the literal fallout. The scale reads 8 pounds over. What happens in the next 24 hours?
Utter chaos. First, the matchmakers have to scramble. They try to negotiate a catchweight bout. But 8 pounds is so heavy that the opponent, Melissa Mullins, might refuse the fight on safety grounds, which is completely her right.
Which she did, right?
Yes. If the fight is canceled, the promotion still has to pay Mullins her show money because she fulfilled her end of the contract and made weight. So they're instantly bleeding money for a product they don't get to broadcast.
Wow.
Furthermore, Mullins just spent 10 weeks paying for a training camp, coaches, and nutritionists, all for a fight that vanishes into thin air. The broadcast loses 30 minutes of inventory, forcing producers to scramble to fill dead air on live television.
And the sources note that Luana Carolina had a history of failing to make weight in the past, too. This wasn't just an isolated freak medical incident.
Which is the final nail in the coffin. A 3-fight win streak mathematically proves you have the talent to compete at the highest level. But the promotion cannot trust her to actually make it to the cage on Saturday night.
And trust is everything.
From a purely corporate perspective, reliability is often vastly more valuable than talent. If a promoter cannot trust you to step on the scale at the contracted limit, your winning record is entirely irrelevant to them. You are a defective cog in a machine that requires absolute predictability to function.
It's a brutal reality check for anyone aspiring to fight for a living. You can be on a winning streak, you can be beating tough, established opponents, and one catastrophic week of water loading and dehydration on the scale can end your career in the premier organization instantly.
It's unforgiving.
It just highlights how incredibly fragile the ecosystem is for the individual athletes, while the massive corporations, the streaming platforms, the broadcast networks, they just keep churning forward completely unaffected.
It really is a tale of two entirely different worlds operating within the exact same sport. We've looked at everything from title fights to roster cuts today. But consider this. If a legacy fighter like Nate Diaz can find vastly bigger financial opportunities outside the strict ecosystem, fighting a guy like Mike Perry on a global platform like Netflix, how long before rising, highly marketable prospects look at the brutal, unforgiving, cutless reality of the UFC and decide to skip it altogether? We might be entering an era where young fighters aim directly for the entertainment spectacle of streaming platforms, bypassing the traditional championship ladder entirely.
That's it for this episode of Budocast. Thanks for joining us as we break down the latest in martial arts. We'll be back soon with more news, stories, and insights. Until then, train hard, stay humble.